What's up guys, it's JD and I'm back with another Weeby video and I'm about to make all of your childhood dreams come true. Recently I stumbled upon an absolutely phenomenal source right here on YouTube. Their channel is called Striving for Animation. I definitely encourage you to go check them out. A lot of what I have to say here has been inspired by the infinite wisdom they've bestowed upon me. So most people, when you ask the question, how do I make my own anime? Will probably stop and contemplate how many strange events had to take place in sequence to lead them to this day, when they've been faced with what might be the most virgin question they've ever been asked, reconsider their relationship with you, and then hopefully just settle on telling you it's unrealistic. But good news for us, it's not. You have two viable options here. You can either learn the software and the techniques and just do it yourself, or you could get a job in Japan. Seriously, it's not that unrealistic, but one thing at a time. Let's start with the software. Typically you'll want to get Clip Studio Paint, OpenToonz, and Blender at a minimum. OpenToonz and Blender are actually free. The only one that costs money is Clip Studio Paint, but it is the most important and versatile one in this list. For the fully featured version, it'll only set you back $220. If you already subscribe to Adobe products, then that's great. They'll help you out a lot, but you can substitute After Effects and Premiere with Blender, and background painting can be done in Clip Studio just as well as Photoshop. So all your bases are pretty much covered by just these three programs. You may have noticed that I've been using Toon Boom Harmony for my animations, which is totally legit. It's just a little more common for Western animation studios. There are a few Japanese studios that use Toon Boom, but it's more common to see something like Clip Studio Paint or TV Paint or something like that. I might make the switch to Clip Studio myself, just to get a little bit closer to the ideal process. Obviously, you'll need to learn how to use the software properly, but it's also important to figure out the exact process that studios follow. And again, I will shout out to Striving for Animation because they provide a very thorough insight into the process of Japanese-style animation. This duo has already done work in the industry in Japan. So please, if you are as invested in this kind of thing as I am, do yourself a favor and go check out their channel. Details aside, there's a lot you might not know about animation on the surface level. Unless, of course, you've done some edumacation before this video. But if you're dumb like me, then you might say something like, well, the computer does all the animation for you these days, doesn't it? Computers can help for sure, but you don't just draw it once and let the computer handle the rest. Unless you're talking about those plastic-esque flash animations. To get a truly lifelike feel in your animations, then you must hand draw every frame. That has never changed. It makes things rather time-consuming for the independent animator, but typically, studios will employ an entire team to streamline the process. Those pieces can be broken down like so. Number 1, storyboard. Whether your project is live action or animation, it does not matter. The storyboard is always the first step in any form of video entertainment. This is essentially like a special kind of comic used for planning each scene. Number 2, background painting. Before you can draw the characters over top, the background needs painted on a separate layer. Characters are usually drawn and cel-shaded, while the background is usually painted in a more traditional format. Number 3, keyframes. The most prominent way of animating is pose to pose, which means you have to find the point that your character moves the furthest in any given action. This can be really obvious or a little more subtle, and often one single action is more complex than you might think, with something simple like standing up being broken into several smaller sections. There's an entire field of study dedicated to the things you should do with keyframes, but suffice to say, the decisions made at this step are the epitome of what it means to be an animator. Number 4, in-betweening. After the major poses are drawn, the actions are made more fluid by tediously filling in every drawing between them. This is probably the most labor-intensive part of the process, and it's typically outsourced to Korea, China, or sometimes other countries. Number 5, inking. Finally, all of your rough drawings are complete, it's time for you to finalize your line art. Digitally inking typically means going over your lines with a vector brush, which basically just means it'll be easier to fill colors in the next step, which brings us to Number 6, coloring. It's pretty obvious what this part is about, but it may be the most underappreciated. It takes a lot of patience and skill, especially if you need to follow highlight and shading lines, because in complex drawings it can be easy to get lost in what color goes where. At this stage, you have to color every single keyframe and in between, which means you've got your work cut out for you. Fortunately, the days of hand painting a clear sheet below the ink sheet are over, and we can rely on much more efficient digital fill tools to get by. And number 7, post-production. Yes, there's still even one more step. All of the previous steps will be repeated over and over for multiple quote-unquote cuts, which are just short animated clips where the camera doesn't break away from the shot. all of these cuts are just stitched together, and sometimes other effects are added on top of the original animation. You don't want to animate an entire 30-minute episode in one application like Clip Studio or Flash, as it will likely overload your computer. Instead, render all these cuts into short video files and then put them all in a sequence using something like Premiere or Blender. Okay, so that's an extremely vague and brief introduction into the whole world of animation, but maybe you've just been sticking around to figure out what I meant by, you can get a job in Japan? Well, if you know a bit of Japanese, then all you really gotta do is get good and get Twitter. Step 1 is obvious, just get really good at drawing and animating. And not just anime, get good at figure drawing and life drawing and all that stuff, because it still applies to anime. Even anime studios will judge you for being a big fat weeb if all you send in is a portfolio full of anime. Step 2 is a little less obvious, but a lot more intriguing. Just sign up for a good old Twitter account. Once you have a solid portfolio going for you, apparently Twitter is a common place for Japanese studios to reach out to freelance animators. If you're skilled and prominent enough on Twitter, they'll come to you. Maybe you're thinking, nah, they won't come to little old me when they got thousands to pick from. But here's the thing. In Japan, there's a huge shortage of animators and no shortage of budget. Multiple studios are desperate for help right now. So if you're really dedicated, it's really not that unrealistic, especially if you're between the ages of 18 and 26. Now, there are some concerns about the low wages over there, but things are looking up these days, with a lot of studios doubling their pay. That said, your income is more dependent on how quickly you can finish a cut, because they usually pay somewhere between $20 and $40 per cut. Whew, that was a big info dump. My favorite kind of anime intro. It's really not. That's all I got for you right now, and I know there's a bottomless pit of information. Believe me, I'm still learning too. But hopefully I at least offered you a good starting point, or at least enlightened you about this thing I like to do. So, until next time. Okay, stop. Come here. Oh, everybody look at my cat. This cat thinks that it's her turn to have all the attention every time I start recording something.